Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to everyone who was able to attend this defense today, especially Dr. Doherty, Dr. Pallett, my chair, Dr. Enzer. I'm really pleased for everyone that was able to join. I'm very happy to have reached this step where I can share my research with you. My dissertation is entitled An Analysis of Technology Attitudes and Self-Efficacy among K-12 teachers following the emergency remote teaching used during COVID-19. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic forced teachers to use technology in new ways. Everyone's familiar with that. Here we are on a Zoom meeting still. Most notably, teachers were forced to pivot to emergency remote teaching, ERT. And the key question that I've asked is, how do those teachers who experienced ERT feel about using classroom technology now, especially if they've returned to in-person instruction? So my study examines the impact of that pivot on teachers' classroom technology integration, or CTI. I have asked, do they intend to keep using the digital tools and techniques in some fashion, or are they more eager to revert to analog measures as soon as they've had that opportunity? So I hope to understand things better in that scholarly approach to this particular question. Rationale for the study. Certainly, classroom technology integration is important because it often helps generate student-centered instruction. And examining how teachers' continuance intention is developed is an opportunity to improve professional development and training. By placing over 3 million teachers just in the US simultaneously into all digital environments, COVID-19 inadvertently created one of the largest potential research groups in history. The fact that these teachers all experienced the same thing in various degrees at the exact same time. So studying the relationship between their attitudes, their knowledge, their technology use, and their instructional practices as they get shifted in this manner really helps us to be able to develop a better understanding, not just for their technology use, but for professional development in general, as well as their evaluation methods and training programs that could follow. Statement of purpose. One of the great quotes that I found in my research was from Rupnow, who indicated that this shift to ERT, it perturbed the system of instruction across the entire planet. Everybody was affected by this. So it gave opportunity to ask the question about which factors are most influential on teachers' continuance intention regarding the ERT tools and techniques that they were forced to adopt. We talk a lot about understanding teachers' why. I think it's equally important that school leaders try to figure out what the why of their teachers is. Ertmer called this the quote final frontier of professional development, and there's a complex landscape of motivations and rationales that lurks beneath the surface for teachers as they make instructional choices in their classrooms. So what teachers choose to put in their toolkit is one of the most important and personal things that they do as professionals. That's particularly true when it comes to technology, which sometimes is a challenge for some. So having this change everything, it gives us a real opportunity to talk about what was, for many teachers, the most significant professional event of their entire careers. The theoretical framework for this study drew largely on 3 different models from the survey of literature. These studies, some of them went back to the beginning of computers in the classroom. Really, ever since the nation at risk, teachers and education leaders have been asking about classroom technology integration, CTI. I narrowed my focus to the internet age and quickly identified these 3 main models of research. These models focused on beliefs and attitudes, skills and knowledge, and then thirdly, perceptions of utility and ease of use. These are the main things that drove teachers' choices regarding technology use. The barriers to technology model, originally framed with Ertmer's study in '99, identified first and second order barriers. Quite simply, there are internal and external ones. The internal ones, the second order barriers, were deemed to be more significant. However, frequently we identify and claim as teachers that the external ones, the resources, the training, the support, are the things that limit our use of technology. But what Ertmer's study identified that, in fact, it was the beliefs and the attitudes that were core to the teacher's decision making around what to use in the classroom and why. The second most influential area of research that I identified was the TPACK framework. This changed the conversation in very significant ways. It was very splashy with a cool visual. It offered multiple categories that were very easy to compare statistically. Quantitative studies exploded overnight, but the framework also proved very controversial for some of those reasons because it was too easy to compare these categories. Were there, was it all about the visual and not enough depth to it? So it proved very controversial. Scholars either loved it or hated it. The third area that I evaluated was expectancy value theory. And this was motivational theory that was a little bit more of a slow burn in scholarly popularity. If you liked Ertmer's approach to the different barriers, but you were more quantitative in your focus, and you didn't like some of the theoretical holes in TPACK, then this was for you. And it drew on social cognition theorists. Motivation scholars like Davis and Bandura focused very strongly on perceptions of utility and ease of use. Pulling all of those things together, I developed this conceptual framework to represent my initial take on the relationship between these constructs in the literature. I centralized self-efficacy as a construct that was driving continuance intention in this model, with effective cognitive and environmental domains for how teachers feel, what teachers know, and then the area surrounding them, the context of the learning environment and the teacher's instruction. The key research questions for my study focused on attitudes, continuance intention, and self-efficacy post-COVID for questions 1, 2, and 3. Each of those questions had some sub-questions related to age and years experience and the impact of those factors on those 3 variables. And then a fourth research question examined the relationship between those 3 variables of, again, attitudes, continuance intention, and self-efficacy. My research design had 4 main components. I made the choice to pursue quantitative methods so that I could focus on the relationship between variables. It was also a strong pattern of quantitative methods use in the research that I examined. My population of interest was K-12 teachers in the United States who lived through the experience of ERT, emergency remote teaching, and who were now back to in-person instruction so that I could examine their feelings after this significant event. Online solicitation was done with convenience sampling and non-probability snowball sampling. I collected data via an online survey that was disseminated through email and social media posts. So that was the main summary of the structure of the design. Procedurally, I sent out emails to teachers who were direct contacts of mine, shared it out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Certainly asked people to share as well, which was the snowball factor. Data analysis was conducted via SPSS. I used bivariate analyses, Spearman's row correlations, and multivariate linear regression analyses, all of which I'll outline here. The survey that I put together, was the instrumentation pulled from 3 main existing research studies from the different areas of research that I had mentioned. Considering attitudes regarding instructional technology, WOSNI was the main source. Technological self-efficacy, there was a study by Coe and others, and for continuance intention, Teo. I contacted these practitioners directly, got their permission to make use of their instruments, and those scales were each used as a set of factors forming specific variables in my study. So I built all of these into the Google form survey that was able to be sent out. For the validity and reliability considerations for the survey instrument that I used, most significantly, all these scales were used prior and were vetted thoroughly in the studies that they originated in. They were examined with exploratory confirmatory factor analyses, inter-rater reliability of the item classification. I also conducted a pilot study with the instrument in full once I had assembled it from its source points. And I also made sure that there was alignment between the original purpose and the original format of these component pieces and the intent that I was using them with. So we felt pretty strongly about that in terms of the validity and reliability. For data collection, I conducted a power analysis at the outset before the study to determine how many participants I would need to have in the study. Indicated a minimum of 85 would be necessary to be able to generate power of 0.8. I ended up getting 108 responses. 7 of them did not meet the criteria that I was seeking, and so those 7 surveys were excluded. So I ended up with a sample size of n equals 101. Conducting a power analysis after the fact, I was able to see that a power of 0.877 was generated with the results that I was able to pull together. Ethical considerations were, of course, part of the study as well, with the survey in its entirety approved by the IRB in advance. The survey was fully anonymous, so I did not have the ability to know who did or did not respond. Certainly the risks were noted, as well as the benefits that were clear, direct opportunity for self-reflection, but societal opportunity for scholarly understanding of CTI after this experience of ERT. Again, the key variables here were continuance intention as the dependent variable, with independent variables of attitudes toward technology and technological self-efficacy. These were both composite variables with the average scores used from the scales in the prior studies. And this was a typical pattern with the literature that I examined. I did consider the factor and variable reliability of all of the elements of the survey. There were very strong Cronbach's alpha scores for all of them. As you can see, the range was from 81 to 94 and change, with solid scores for all 3 of the major variables. Descriptive statistics revealed the answers to research questions 1, 2, and 3. Participants were found to be more positive than negative about technology use as teachers. Participants were also found to be comfortable with their ability to succeed in technology, so they felt they had strong self-efficacy. And participants did generally tend to indicate an intention to keep using classroom technology integration now that they were back to in-person instruction. So we've got pretty strong yes answers for all 3 of those initial first research questions. To examine age and years experience, I used a Spearman's Row analysis. And I found, interestingly enough, that these factors were not significant for any of the variables. That was somewhat surprising. You might think that age and years experience would be significant factors on teachers' technology use. However, the null hypothesis was not rejected for any of these questions. And there was no discernible relationship found at all between these demographic variables and each one of these constructs. No discernible impact on attitude, self-efficacy, or continuance intention. So that was a worthwhile takeaway. Bivariate analyses found strong relationships between these 3 core factors: attitude, self-efficacy, and continuance intention. All had strong relationships between them through bivariate analyses. We found they were positively correlated in every direction between the 2 in each one of the analyses. Digging into research question 4, I conducted multivariate regression analyses to examine the relationship between the variables, not just the bivariate, but as a set. The null hypothesis was rejected in this case because there was a net relationship to be found on continuance intention while controlling for the other variables. And it was found to be significant in that way for both attitudes and self-efficacy. So strong relationship for continuous attention while controlling for the other 2. That strength of that relationship was about 1/3, which was a pretty substantive impact. That attitudes and self-efficacy each had a strong about 1/3 influence on continuance intention moving forward. It was noted that attitudes was the stronger of the 2. Attitudes had a stronger impact on continuance intention than self-efficacy. And that did contradict aspects of the original conceptual framework that I had put together. So I noted that as well. To rule out potential multicollinearity, I did analyze each one of these factors and regress them separately over 3 models, one for attitudes only, one for self-efficacy only, and one with both. These, again, would be the component factors of the composite variables as I pulled these scales from prior studies. So I examined them as a set, but then here I examined them individually to make sure that multicollinearity was not influencing the outcome. Expectancy lost significance in the combined model. So that was the 3rd one that I included both scales in there altogether. Attitudes and perceptions of utility and ease of use all held strong across all models, which was interesting. That the attitudes and perceptions really held strong impact on the outcome all the way through. As I tried to analyze this and pull it together, I came up with a few theoretical implications. First, the conceptual framework that I identified needed revision. So I needed to have more significant focus on the expectancy value theory elements to emphasize perception and to decentralize the influence of self-efficacy a little bit. So that needed some revision. I also found it very interesting that I was able to confirm in some respects the work done by Ertmer and by Davis. They were both found to be correct in my view from this survey. Ertmer originally suggested that second order barriers appeared to matter more than first order ones. And that was confirmed here post-COVID. And then Davis's conclusions from back in actually his dissertation study back in 1986, I found that perception-based criteria are central for teachers' continuance intention with technology use. So I was able to tie it all the way back there to his dissertation study. I revised the conceptual framework with those findings in mind. I elevated expectancy value theory in that and turned that into its own domain, you see in yellow, and the perception elements were highlighted there. I absorbed self-efficacy as a construct into that domain with this revision. I had several professional and policy implications that I thought were worthwhile. To reverse a lyric from the late, great Jimmy Buffett, changes in attitudes lead to changes in attitudes, to latitudes. In other words, to shift where you want teachers to go, you need to start with their mindset. This is especially true regarding classroom technology use. I would suggest there are implications beyond technology here as well. Differentiated training should account for not just teachers' background, but should also gather survey results in advance to gauge attitudes and perceptions as part of that differentiation. Think about the audience that you're trying to reach, try to categorize them in terms of where their attitudes and perceptions already are based on survey results, and then differentiate professional development accordingly. That's, I think, relevant for technology in particular from the outcomes of this study, but I do think it has broader implications beyond technology to professional development at large, pre-service training programs, collaborative school partnerships, PDS schools, as well as performance evaluation observation practices. Anywhere you're trying to guide adult learning should really take into account the formation that they have already had getting to the point that they're at. So my suggestions for future research in that regard involve, as I did with the revision to the conceptual framework, restructuring the scales as well to focus on the more significant factors. Confirmatory factor analysis and structural equation modeling would be beneficial to consider in future research. A meta-analysis would also be useful, and consideration for the limitations of this study could be countered in future research. I used exclusively quantitative study here, but qualitative methods would also be beneficial to dig deeper. And then, of course, greater numbers and greater diversity would only enhance the validity and the reliability of the findings. So I certainly recommend those as well for future research. To summarize my findings, I would say that post-COVID research is just beginning. I like to think that this study contributed to the literature because these factors about continuance and tension for classroom technology integration had not yet been reviewed post-COVID. And this was obviously a significant event. So to review these factors post-COVID, I found to be worthwhile in a scholarly sense. And to summarize, the things that I found to be not significant were age and years experience and first order barriers, the resources, the leadership of the school. Those things were not the most significant factors. Instead, what was significant were teacher attitudes and teacher perceptions on technology. And those are the areas that can be harnessed to create more effective professional development moving forward. With that, I would like to conclude and take your questions.
John, can you stop screen sharing so that we can
Certainly
see you a little better? There we go.
Hi there.
All right, so I guess I'm curious as to what your next steps are. Like, how are you going to share your findings, or what's your next step research-wise?
Well, I'm certainly very interested in the practical applications. I'm interested as a school leader in finding ways to improve professional development. I'm interested in being able to be impactful in teachers' instruction and therefore influence student achievement. I think in an age where, in the degree program I'm in here, it's changing populations, and we see technology use is certainly affecting that. And I think being able to understand this better can be one of the first dominoes to improve professional development. We can influence student instruction and boost student achievement that way. So I'm very interested in continuing to train and work with the teachers that I work with closely. And after the degree program's over, opportunity to teach in higher education setting might also be useful. I think pre-service teaching is another area where this is highly applicable. Information to gauge students who want to be teachers and their attitudes towards technology, and other topics as well. How do you prime the pump before you go into the training rather than just spray and pray that it works out.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members?
Not really a question, I guess. I was really surprised that age was not related. A lot of the things that I've read about technology use, especially during COVID, is that, younger, more technology savvy folks had a much easier time with this. And so I was surprised. Do you have any thoughts about why that was the case?
I certainly was surprised by that as well. I think it would be a great opportunity for future research. And my theory, with no real basis at the moment, is just the theory is that the Great Retirement played a role in that. We have seen a lot of folks who have left the profession, during COVID and the immediate aftermath of COVID. They took opportunity to say, okay, I was close to retirement already, and I'm feeling this is difficult, and I'm going to use that as the opportunity to move to the exit. So I think that may have potentially shifted the pool a little bit in terms of that. We certainly saw, as you say, that struggle from many on that end of the spectrum, but they may have removed themselves from the situation. But then, the other part that I also have to consider as a researcher is that certainly I put out there a survey that some survey completer bias may be part of that as well, right? The people who were choosing to complete a survey done online may have been more inclined to agree with the research questions, and future research should probably also account for that to some degree.
So, John, what was the most challenging part of the research?
Oh my goodness. One of the most significant areas for me is I think a lot of the definitions were not clear in the scholarly literature. Words like attitudes and beliefs were used pretty liberally by folks, and even the word you might not think of immediately, technology, was used pretty liberally and meant a lot of different things to different people. And we might imagine technology in our mind and what that constitutes in terms of classroom technology, but it's not actually uniform. For some it might mean a certain piece of software, but some it's the projector that they have in their classroom, or it's just the word processing program I'm using to develop the worksheets for students, or what have you. It's the fact where some people are like, oh yeah, I use technology, I email. It varies a lot. So getting some clarity and of the definition of terms across these multiple decades of research was challenging. And through the two seminar pieces that I did prior to moving into the final dissertation phase, that really helped me clear that up a lot on my end.